You should be able to hear me now. I think I fixed it. Great. Okay, here we are with our live stream, and I have some sort of weird feedback. 1 second. It's because I have the live stream playing in a tab. Okay, great. We are here for the first live stream in a bit. Let me crack a beer and say hi to everybody. It's been a long day. I was back teaching this morning, and yeah, I saw this news about this new cat domestication article, and I was like, I got stuff to say about that. The sun god has arrived, as somebody says there. Perfect. So on that note, you're used to me putting out some debunking videos. My last one, I think, was pretty awesome, though for some reason the YouTube algorithm gods have not favored it. So if you've not seen it yet, it's about this crazy conspiracy theory. Let's just show the intro to
Way
it.
out there and put that fucking tinfoil hat on tight. If they open up the labyrinth, if they figure out a way to drain the water, and they do find out that that 40-meter long metallic thing is something from another place,
interdimensional,
something from another place.
Right.
No. Let's put down the tinfoil hat before we go into the labyrinth, as Joe calls it. So yeah, if you've not seen my last video, for some reason it's not getting much love on YouTube, go check it out. It's hilarious. I drink a lot of scotch and I debunk this crazy conspiracy of some UFO at this site in Egypt called Hawara, where there is definitely not a UFO because they're lying about it, like just straight up fraud and lies. So please go check out the Labyrinth video and share it or something. I'm very upset that YouTube has not been promoting it because it had really good, people seem to like it. But you know, it is what it is. It's how it goes. And we're here instead to talk about something fun. Let's talk instead about, oh wait, I got to get my slides up. Ancient cats. Ancient cats indeed is what we're thinking about here. And this new study that really, I think, I'm actually really pleased about this new study. It confirms something that I've been arguing about on social media for like, I don't know, 5 years. So, you know, I'm very excited about this new study, which is why I saw it today. It literally just came out 5 days ago. I saw it today on social media and I was like, I got to stream about this immediately because I got things to say. This relates to, it doesn't directly relate to my own research, but it indirectly relates to my own research. And it's something that from my own research, I've been arguing with other people about at conferences and in social media and stuff like that for a long time. So yeah, so we are here for some old news, which I never put up. Stupid. I have this weird new camera setup and I can't see things. 1 second. Let me get our old news background because we gotta. Yeah, we're back with old news. Oh, no, it disappeared. Come on, show up. There we go. We're back to old news. All right, now I'll get you guys your chat back up. All right. So yeah, so we are gonna sift through the news. What are we gonna find as we sift through it? What are we gonna sign as we sift through it? We're sifting through this news and we found ourselves a cat. This cat right here is one of the site cats that friends of mine adopted. This is little Nestor from the Palace of Nestor at Pylos. Of course, you named the cat after the mythical king that lived there, of course. And so we find cats all the time, especially modern ones. My own cat is also a site cat from Knossos on Crete. And so cats are plentiful on archaeological sites, to be honest. So that's pretty cool, if you ask me. I think that there's a lot of cool cats around, but I think what we're interested today in is ancient cats. And what I want to look at is this study that just came out really just a few days ago in Science magazine, the dispersal of domestic cats from North Africa to Europe around 2,000 years ago. It comes out of Claudio Ottoni's lab, who is probably the top ancient cat researcher in the world. He's been at University of Rome, I think, Sapienza. He's been publishing DNA of cats from all over the world for the last, I don't know, decade and a half, something like that. 2 decades. So there's really, no better experts on this topic than the people that were involved in this article. There's a lot of really good scholars involved. I think I saw Beat de Coopera's name and other people who are really great, Willem van Neer, and really good zooarchaeologists and archaeogeneticists. So this is, top-notch study. It's come out. It's gone through peer review. It's done the rounds, and it completely changes just everything that people thought they knew about the dispersal of ancient cats. And I, for one, am cheering. I need to just get myself on screen and say, salute to the team. They did a fantastic job. And I'm so pleased to see this result because, like I said, based off my own observations of the dispersals of bones, not DNA, but the dispersals of bones, somebody asked in the chat, do I study just ancient animals or ancient humans? I don't know where it is in the chat. I am an expert in ancient animals. So I study ancient animal bones. I've come across a few cat bones, but not many. And that's where my own hunches come from. And I've read a lot of reports. And I am so pleased. Cheers to these guys. It is debunking what I think has long been a long-running academic myth that has persisted in the general public about the timeline of cat evolution and domestication and the spread. And we have our lovely cat right here, Mr. Tavro. Say hi. Uh-oh, he wants to go. Sorry. So he's from Knossos, by the way, but there's all this kind of misinformation in the media. It's not misinformation. I just think it's not. Look, I oftentimes argue against pseudoscientists, right? But there's also academic debates, and this is an academic debate. Both sides have real evidence. But I am of the opinion that our timeline of cat domestication drastically needs changing and dispersal. And this article is one key step. So I'm going to present to you guys some of my own thoughts on this. Understand that other scholars disagree. But this latest article, which is really what I think is a top-notch article, I think it helps prove my point in a big new way. So let's think about some of this. For a long time, oh, you guys can't see my screen. I have all these videos I'm juggling and screens and stuff. Here we go. So until about 25 years ago, scholars basically thought that the Egyptians domesticated cats. So it really was not that long ago, 22 years ago, in fact, 21 years ago, then until about 2004. Scholars basically assumed it was Egyptians because we have all this amazing Egyptian iconography. We have Egyptian cat mummies. It's clear that in some cases they were pets, and in other cases they were sort of deified. But there's just so much evidence for cats in ancient Egypt that it sure seemed like they were the ones to domesticate them and introduce them and to have an obsession with them and all this kind of stuff. So, there's like the kind of evidence that we have here that I'm going to play a clip from a video by Curtis Woodside. I'll put it in the chat. It's on cat worship in ancient Egypt. And so you can look at, for example, these cat mummies.
I'm investigating the worship of cats in ancient Egypt. And I know you are a big cat lover, especially of the mummified variety.
Dead cats are best.
I've noticed that there's a lot of mummified cats being offered to Bastet. Now, Are you of the opinion that the priests were deliberately diddling the cat mummies with not putting complete cats inside, or what was the reason for that?
So we have things that we call amalgam or false mummies, because with whether they're ibises or cats or what have you, or raptors, sometimes there's a bit of a
Yes.
cat in it.
For the essence?
No,
No.
you asked the question, I'll answer it.
Okay.
So first, one thing is they were diddling the punters. Second thing is that a part represents the whole in ancient Egypt, and if you say the words, then it magically becomes a cat inside. And then the third thing is that if you've mummified things, and I have done experimental work with animals with my students, bits fall off.
Yes.
They're sacred, and you might think, oh, bloody hell, the cat's already been mummified without that bit. But we will gather together all these parts and make another mummy out of it because it's sacred, because it's been transformed.
Yes.
And so those are the three main reasons why we think this might have happened.
Okay, so there was no wastage.
No,
wastage.
waste not, want not.
We're load. So that was a video by Curtis Woodside. He has a great documentary on the worship of cats in ancient Egypt. I highly recommend checking it out. I'll make sure to put it in the video description as well and put a card to it for the published version. And that was Salima Ikram, who is one of my personal heroes. She's also a studier of animal bones. From Egypt. She's published an amazing number of awesome stuff, animals in Egypt, including cat mummies. And she's also like the leading expert on mummification. And it's funny, what she brought up there is we have all these fantastic cat mummies, right? Come on, why is this going slow? So we have all these fantastic cat mummies from ancient Egypt, like these on the left in the British Museum, my own photograph. But they're not always cat mummies in what we think of. Sometimes they might only have one bone in there, or no bones. So they're kind of almost like fakes. And that's what they were saying. They're diddling the punters. It means they're ripping off the people buying this stuff. But I don't actually think that's the case, because this is actually a fairly common behavior in ancient mummies in Egypt and elsewhere, not just ancient Egypt, but like worship of animals and other things. A part can equal a whole, as she says. And we discussed this actually in my last video about the crocodile mummies. So this is not just a cat thing. Let's just remind you guys about crocodile mummies and how they were at Hawara. But what's absolutely mind-blowing is that a whole bunch of the crocodile mummies that were unearthed at Hawara are fakes. They're dummy crocodiles. They are mummy wrappings shaped like crocodiles and stuffed with straw and sand and pebbles, which is absolutely pretty cool and wild. As Petrie noted in his 1889 publication,
in every direction, the work brought up crocodiles of all sizes, from monsters 15 feet long to infants, and even eggs. The apparent number was swelled moreover by quantities of dummies, evidently made for a ceremonial purpose. The imitation crocodile mummies consist of bundles of reeds or grass, with an egg or only a single bone inside, and they seem to have been intended to testify to a worshipper's devotion to Sebek by such pious care bestowed on the sacred animal. Doubtless their preparation and sale was a priestly trade.
Some of these mummies, like one CT scanned at the Manchester Museum, did include real crocodiles, but a large number were fakes or mummies. The two scanned from the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge were fakes, and an article on them in The Guardian provocatively claims,
modern medical science has exposed the villainy of the crocodile mummy sellers of Hawara. More than 2,000 years after they defied the edict of a pharaoh and turned neatly bandaged bundles of rubbish into a nice little earner.
I'm not sure if fakes is really the right way to put this, as symbolic offerings were absolutely a thing in ancient Egypt, and Petrie mentioned there's oftentimes a single bone or an egg inside there. So there we go. So I don't really think that these are fakes per se. They're cat mummies, but they have one bone in there. There's no wastage, and a part can represent the whole. And so I think that's really important. And symbolic offerings are certainly a thing. I think it's somebody put it in the chat. Did I see it? Where was it in the chat? About saints. Yeah, like having bits of saints in former Catholic churches. So it's a really good point that this kind of tradition stands around. But the reality is there's this explosion of evidence for cats and in Egypt. And we no longer, there's disagreements now on when the cat was domesticated, is maybe the right way to put it. So this whole debate started in 2004. Jean-Denis Vien, another fantastic zooarchaeologist, published this burial of a human and a cat right here, and it's from Cyprus. And that's the significant thing, because cats were introduced to Cyprus. There were no native wild cats there before then. And so this was argued to be the earliest domestication of a cat. And we'll return to this one, because this is something that I am personally a little skeptical on. But it's interesting. It's intriguing. Clearly, somebody brought cats to the island, and they loved them enough to be buried with them, or they revered them enough, or worshipped them enough, or honored them enough, or something like that. Or it was an offering of some sort. Whatever. That's tough to exactly understand intention, but it's certainly, to our eyes, we see cats as these cute little pets, and it seems like this could be the example of the first, pet cat in the world. And this is from, 9,500, 10,000 years ago or so on Cyprus. So that totally shocks it, because all of our Egyptian evidence is from like 4,000 years ago. So it's like, whoa, stuff just keeps getting older. That's when these little boys came. So that's the latest domestic cat. That's my cat Tavro, who's from the island of Crete. He was born in the labyrinth at Knossos. Sorry. Fucking labyrinth, Joe Rogan, Jesus Christ. So this is what we think. This is what several scholars think, I should say, could be the earliest evidence for the domestication of a cat is on Cyprus. So this revolutionized everything 21 years ago. And then everybody started looking for earlier cats. And a lot of times they didn't find them. Sometimes they thought they found them. And we have sort of publications like this from 3 years ago, where it talks about the domestication of the history of the domestic cat in Central Europe. And you can see that there's sort of this introduction to ancient Greece, 1400 years BC, so 3,500 years ago, the North Balkans, 7,500 years BC, and then all the way to Central Europe, which these people have focused on. Now, when this article came out, if you followed me on Twitter, you might have seen me fuming about it. Now, the reason I'm fuming about it at the time was this arrow right here to ancient Greece. Right here. It says ancient Greece, 1400 years BCE. I can promise that there are no domestic cat bones from that early in ancient Greece. Like, zilch, none. I've done my research. This is my field of expertise. There are seriously zilch and none. And so these arrows on this map and that date just pissed me off. It's like, where are you getting this from? They don't cite anything in their article about that attribution. They talk a lot about what they have in sort of Central Europe and stuff like that and whatnot. And so I'm like, what the hell is going on here? Why are people claiming that there's cats in Bronze Age Greece when we have no bones for them? And so this is where there's a lot of sort of confusing things if you study cats. And that's what I want to talk about. Cats are an extremely difficult topic to study. So the first part is their bones. Their bones, here, let me get up a picture of a cat skeleton. Man, there's a lag here. Sorry. So a cat skeleton, the skeletal remains of a domestic cat are really not that much different from the skeletal remains of a wild cat. It's not like other species where we see a lot of differences, and you might be able to recognize this even from their behavior. Cats, we can throw this up, and cats, sort of they act all cute and whatnot, but they're still quite active like their ancestors are. Like cats are quite active. They are still quite active predators and hunters. It's one reason why cats are slowly decimating, rodent populations and bird populations, even just our household cats that people let out. And so what that does is it creates all these problems. And cats still, as the running joke goes, you can't herd cats, you can't control them, you can't even domesticate them. So from their own behavior, you can sort of even gather why cat bones are not going to distinguish too much. And so most of the ways in which we distinguish cats, domesticated cats from wild cats, is really their coat and their their fur and stuff like that. But that doesn't preserve archaeologically. And their behavior, because they obviously behave different from wild cats. They're friendlier, even if they still are predators and whatnot. And of course, their diet, because we feed them differently and whatnot. But this creates a big problem where you look at those sort of earliest domestic cat bones that I showed you from Cyprus. And to be honest, the main argument that this is a domesticated or a tame cat is the context, which means it's buried with a human, which is not definitive proof. After all, it could be a wild cat that was offered. Now, that means they brought wild cats to the island, and that's something that we'll talk about in a second. The second issue with cats is they look also like wild cats. So, for example, when you're talking about here's how they got that 1500 BCE date, is because of this specific wall painting. They don't cite it, but this is where it comes from in the literature, which is this wall painting of a cat from Ayathriada, from Minoan Crete from the Bronze Age. It looks like a cat, right? But the problem is wild cats look really similar too. Wild European cat. Let me just pull up an image. You could pull up an image from, just Google it, and wild European cats. Oh, what's going on? Look exactly like domestic cats. I don't know what else to put you. These are wild cats right here. And so, they look exactly the same in many ways. So iconographically, how are you going to be able to distinguish and determine that this is a domestic cat from a wild cat, since wild cats look very, very fucking similar to domestic cats? We've really not changed them in the same way that we see with dogs, for example. Domestic dogs, with the exception, obviously, of huskies and whatnot, they look completely different from wolves. We know this. You could just look at poodles and stuff like that. They're just completely different. And so we have sort of this image as well, which is from 400 BC. It's a Greek vase painting from Agrigento in Italy, and it kind of looks like a cat. But as art historian Tyler Jo Smith has pointed out, she calls it the cat, lion, panther, leopard, cheetah problem, which is the way that ancient Greeks painted animals is not always scientifically accurate, is maybe the right way to put it. And so, they weren't trying to make something that we could identify closely to a specific species. They cut corners, they mimicked stuff, they just kind of, look at lions. This is lions. This is Hercules fighting the Nemean lion on ancient Greek vases. It sure is not a photorealistic lion that you're seeing. So when you look at ancient art, you should not be expecting something to look perfect, which is, of course, the cat, lion, cheetah, panther, leopard problem. We can't always speciate these creatures very closely on ancient art. And so, we even have some. This one to me reminds me of the Wizard of Oz. There's another one that looks even more like the lion from the Wizard of Oz, and I couldn't find it in time. I was rushing to pull this together. And so, so this is an issue of using ancient art. Unless we have a whole lot of it, like we have lots of lions, or in Egypt, we have hundreds and hundreds of representations of cats and their mummies and stuff like that. When you're just dealing with a couple examples, and I want to be clear, these are the handful of examples that people have said might be domestic cats on ancient Greek art. It's like this one. There's one in a private collection, which ethically I'm not going to show. And I think those are the only three that I know of. And then there's the language issue. So the term in ancient Greek for cat is the word ailuros. I'll put it in the chat. Ailuros. And that word does not just mean cat. This is a cat weasel problem. Because let me go back to the cat, lion, panther, leopard, cheetah problem. That's art. In ancient Greek texts, we have the cat weasel problem. The word ailuros means both weasel and cat. I repeat, the word for cat in ancient Greek, ailuros, also just means weasel. So thank you, thin layer of dust. I appreciate it. Beer money for the sun god. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So if we cannot tell a cat from an artistic depiction, and we can't even be sure if textual references that mention cats, they might be mentioning weasels, we really have no good evidence from ancient Greece because we have no bones. There are no bones that I know of from the ancient Greek world until later that are of cats. I've never encountered one from this early. I've encountered some from Roman contexts. And so lots of people argue about the dispersal of cats, and they use this map published, 4 years ago at this point, 3 years ago. It's not quite 2026 yet. And they say, hey, we have the introduction of cats to Europe in the North Balkan 7500 BC, into Central Europe 6200 to 6000 BC. For some reason, they skipped Greece and showed up in 1400 BC, 6,000 years later. And then to Rome eventually 500 BCE, and then, Spain and onwards. It's a really weird, jagged dispersal. Like, why is there a distinction right here between ancient Greece of 6,000 years with the Balkans and Central Europe? So where does this study come from? What this study is looking at is it's looking at mitochondrial DNA. So as you might know, if you think about DNA, we have our full genome that exists in every single cell within us. And then within our cells, we have mitochondria. They're the kind of powerhouses of the cells, as you'd learn. And they have their own set of genomes. And those you inherit from your mother. So they passed on from your mother to daughter, mother to daughter, mother to daughter. If I had children, I would not be able to pass on my mitochondrial DNA because I'm not female. I don't have an egg. So though I am the sun god, but yeah. So that video is crazy. So this is all based off of mitochondrial DNA, and it obviously has, like I said, some confusing issues that people like me have argued against, at least on social media and in conferences. I've never published anything because I don't have enough skin in the game. I haven't found enough cat bones to really publish anything in an article on. But I've always been leery of this article. And so this article has now been superseded by the article that just came out last week, which is now looking at the full genome of cats. So we're no longer working with mitochondrial DNA. And the conclusions of this article are actually quite interesting. No, I'll get to that in a second. No, I don't want to show that. What do I want to show? One second. Here we go. I wanted to actually show the article itself. So it's quite a big study. They sequenced cat genomes from modern wildcats, 20th century wildcats in different spaces, ancient cat remains that were found sort of all over, from Europe to North Africa to elsewhere. I guess none of the ancient ones came from North Africa, but from Anatolia, so modern Turkey and Europe, a wide range of ancient cat remains. One second, I just want to say thank you to Balthazar. I also have never understood the allure of pseudoscience, but it just sort of is what it is. And I really want to thank you for your super chat. I really appreciate it. And so this was a big study. This is by far the biggest study of cat genomes that archaeologically that has been published to date. And so it is actually kind of cool. So what did they discover? So for one, they mentioned that burial of a cat that led to this hypothesis of domestication. However, the more traditional view still suggests perhaps pharaonic Egypt, or maybe in Egypt, but earlier in the pre-dynastic period where we have some bones from graves and stuff like that. But the big question is sort of the dispersal of cats and the relationship between wild cats and domestic cats. And so the key thing that this study did, it debunked, and debunk is, again, maybe not the wrong word, but this is a scholarly debate. The previous article that I mentioned about sort of Central European cats in the Neolithic, it was very much based on good evidence, isotopes, and we'll get into the isotopes in a second, but the mitochondrial DNA. But what this new study showed is it showed that the mitochondrial DNA in European wildcats actually had overlap with the mitochondrial DNA from wildcats that were domesticated in the Near East or North Africa. So what that means is these earlier studies that were using mitochondrial DNA of cats in Central Europe and just mitochondrial DNA, they might have been tricked. They might have been tricked by the fact that we now know that there's overlap between the mitochondrial DNA of wildcats in Europe and in North Africa and the Near East. And so there's not a clear distinction between them. So you can't use mitochondrial DNA to identify a domesticated descendant of Near Eastern wildcats versus a wildcat population in Europe. So those earlier studies need to be thrown out because they're based off of this new evidence for both wildcats and domestic cats shows that we really need their nuclear genome, their complete genomes, to be able to answer this kind of question about the dispersal of cats, into Europe and whatnot. And so what they found, and this is where I cheer, is that it looks like they show up, but with the Romans. So it's about 2,000 years ago is when they show up. They directly radiocarbon dated these cat remains from different archaeological sites. And so they have a good coverage from 9,000 years ago or 11,000 years ago up until about 100 years ago. And so they have really good coverage here. And in a sense, they were introduced around 2,000 years ago, probably from North Africa, probably from Egypt, and probably during the Roman period. And this makes me cheer because like I said, I've been arguing with colleagues about this for I don't know, 10 years. And I keep saying, we have no domesticated cat bones in Greece. We have none. We just have none until later on in the Roman period. And so if we have none, if you're going to talk about the introduction of a new species, a species as important as the cat, that's living alongside people as pets and as commensal sort of predators, and they're living with humans, why do we not have any of their bones? Like we have bones from every other species that they have domesticated by the thousands, by the tens of thousands. I have studied like 1 million fucking bones in my career. And I don't know how many tens of thousands of them are dogs, and let alone cattle, pigs, sheep, goat, your normal domesticates. No fucking cats though. And so I want to be clear, these kind of issues are common in archaeology. So there's a similar debate about chickens, about when did the chickens arrive. So chickens, if you don't know, are originally jungle fowl from Southeast Asia. They're jungle fowl that were domesticated in Southeast Asia. And for a long time, people thought that chickens were in the Greek world much earlier, in the Bronze Age or in the early Greek period after the Bronze Age. And, we have kind of even iconographic depictions from like 600, 700. I think there's even some that people argue are chickens from 900 BC. And then there's some questionable bones. But I've always argued against this because, well, the bones are so few. These are 2 chicken bones that I've studied. And these are from the later period, like 4th, 3rd century BC. So why, if chickens are introduced and they're a major domestic species, where's the bones, man? Where is the friggin' bones? And I plan on doing a video, a standalone video on this at some point, because I have a whole Twitter thread on it, and I've written up short notes on this in my scholarly publications. So where are the bones? And we now know, thanks to actually some of my colleagues here at Cardiff, Julia Best. She is a chicken specialist. She's one of the world leading chicken specialists, and she teaches here at Cardiff with me. And we teach together on some bone classes and isotope classes and whatnot. She just a couple years ago published, evidence that shows that chickens were domesticated later than we thought by thousands of years. We used to think that chickens were domesticated in like China or Southeast Asia, like something like 10, 11,000 years ago. Now we know it's thousands of years later. Second of all, we now know that they're not introduced into the Near East, Egypt, the Mediterranean, the Greek world, the Roman world, etc., until the middle of the first millennium BCE. And so it's much later than we originally thought. Now that we've had a look with big data sets, that we've dated securely, and that we've studied with multidisciplinary methods, it's quite clear that chickens show up later than we actually thought. We can also see this here. Wait, let me pull up this chicken bones again. I don't know if some of you have heard this, but these bones here in the middle are ancient chickens. This is a drumstick, an ancient chicken drumstick. These are modern chicken bones to either side. Here, wait, let me get one myself. This is an example of a traditional breed. We have bred these creatures into sort of monstrosities, Franken chickens for our factory farming. They no longer look or taste alike. I highly recommend everybody get some traditional chicken breed and try eating it because it's so much more flavorful than the stuff that we factory farm and produce. I call these guys Franken chickens. But yeah, this kind of redating of stuff to later periods, it also happens with rabbits. So there was a big debate about the introduction of rabbits. Rabbits actually come from Iberia, from like modern Spain and Portugal. And, we have these pictures on vases. They look like rabbits, right? They sure look like rabbits. They're not. Again, we don't have any rabbit bones from this early. Rabbits don't show up until the Roman period when we start seeing bones show up on all of our sites in plentiful numbers because they're domesticated and they live with humans and they're eaten by humans and all this kind of stuff. And so, this is another one of these things where we have changed our dates on stuff and made things later. We initially assumed that chickens were domesticated earlier than they were. We initially assumed rabbits were domesticated and spread earlier than they were. And I think the same thing is going on with cats. And so when you hear sort of all these headlines, the media loves to say, the world's oldest chicken, cat, rabbit, whatever, the world's oldest whatever. This is what gets published in the media, right? But what gets ignored in the media is when we correct this stuff and we actually say, hey, this stuff happened later. Things don't always get older. Graham Hancock's catchphrase.
Question is, when did it happen? This is why I sometimes wear a T-shirt, and I did on the last show with you, which says stuff just keeps on getting older.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't understand.
So stuff does not always get older. Oh, I didn't answer this, did I? Sorry, 1 second. Let's go back to this. What are these if not a rabbit? Come on, there's a lag on this. These are wild hare. These are wild hare. So, like hare, not hair, but like the tortoise and the hare. So we have lots of wild hare that occupied the extent of Europe and whatnot. And the Greeks write about how hare were gifts and stuff like that. And so it just took the work of looking into the bones to dissect this all around. And so sorry, dude, this is not a rabbit. This is a hare. I am sorry. I am 100% sure of this. There are no rabbit bones in the Greek world this early. There are plentiful hare bones, though. I have studied thousands of hare bones across the Greek world this early, and I am 100% sure they're hare bones because the bones of hare actually look reasonably different than the bones of rabbits. On most anatomical body parts, they have features that you can use to distinguish them. So let's go back to Graham Hancock's clip. Sorry, I got distracted. I forgot to explain that these were hair. I apologize. Don't tell me I'm a liar because I forgot to say something. Jesus Christ.
Question is, when did it happen? This is why I sometimes wear a T-shirt, and I did on the last show with you, which says stuff just keeps on getting older.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't understand what
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand that that's just a scam. First of all, thank you, Duke of Shaska. I really appreciate the super chat. Yes, ancient cats are awesome. They destroy lands. So the problem with Graham's catchphrase, stuff keeps getting older, is that's what it looks like if you just look at media and journalism, because journalism focuses on the oldest example of the X, Y, or Z. And it keeps showing the oldest example, and you get the opinion that wow, everything just keeps getting older. But the reality is that archaeologists look at the dates of lots of different things. And as I've shown here, the dates for cats, chickens, and rabbits keep getting younger, not older. So, they're perfect examples that show the media simply does not parrot or trumpet, I should say, this kind of research because it's less interesting to the public. The public wants to know about the oldest thing. It makes for a fucking good ass headline, right? The oldest thing in the world. And so we have this impression that as archaeologists just find stuff, things are getting older, but actually that's not true. Sometimes they get older, then they get younger again. Sometimes they get older and they stay older. Sometimes they just get younger. It's called updating and downdating is how we refer to it. So to end this, I want to think about really quickly about cats again. So we think of cats, of course, let's go back to Egypt for a second. We think of cats as pets, right? And cats make for just lovely pets. I have a pet cat. Probably several of you have a pet cat. And so, cats are fantastic pets. But, cats were not pets in Egypt the same way that other dogs were, for example. We know that dogs had names. Cats, on the other hand, did not have names. So they were not given the same status of pethood that, say, dogs were given in ancient Egypt. So let's go back to Curtis Woodside's documentary with Salima Ikram on cats as pets. There are a couple of examples, only two, where we can sort of argue that these cats were treated as pets in ancient Egypt. So here we go.
We do know of two examples of pet cats from minor royal tombs. The uncle of Tutankhamun had his pet cat buried with him and placed into its own stone sarcophagus. The side of this artifact shows the clear glyph spelling out the cat's general name, Meow. The larger felines were more closely associated with the royals. At Saqqara, in the tomb of Maya, the wet nurse of Tutankhamun, a mummified lion was discovered, again showing that royals were more connected to the larger felines.
Let's get under cover. It's raining. Get under cover.
Also in the Cairo Museum are the treasures from Tuya and Yuya. They have an exquisite golden chair of Princess Sit Amun, with a pet cat sitting under the chair of Queen T.
So we have a couple examples of cats. Notice that the cat didn't even have a name. It was just called Meow, which is the word for cat. So there's a bit of a distinction here. Just to clarify something in the chat, aren't cats the only domestic that doesn't come from a herd or a pack? Could explain their elusive nature in life and in the archaeological record. But the thing is, once cats appear, we get their bones plentifully in the archaeological record. So I don't think that, like, in Roman period context and Egyptian context, we have lots of cat bones, right? Lots of cat mummies even in Egypt. So that I think means that it's you're trying to explain negative evidence rather than looking at the evidence that we had. So the second purpose for cats is their commensal state, which somebody literally just put in the chat, which is perfect. I'm going to play a clip from a friend of the channel, Smitty Nathan, who has a great video, which you should also see after this on ancient cats in general, though she'll need to update it some with some of this new information from this new article.
House cats actually had different roles in societies around the world and across time, thus influencing people and societies in different ways. Scholars suggest that in many cases, the relationship between house cats and humans was commensal, or mutually beneficial. For an example of this, let's go to an archaeological site in the Shaanxi province of China. Here, archaeologists recovered 5,300-year-old cat and rodent bones. Now, it's important to note that there was some debate surrounding these cat remains. The authors of the original study thought that these cats were related to Near Eastern wildcats and likely would have been introduced via trade. However, a later study re-examined the bones using morphometric analysis and concluded they belonged to native leopard cats. Even with this debate, the original isotope analysis of the cat remains revealed something interesting. These cats seem to have ate a diet rich in millet, a grain grown by humans at the site. The archaeologists suggest that these cats helped farmers by hunting rodents that ate their grain and in return got a relatively stable food source. Some of the remains even suggest that certain cats might have been cared for by humans. This study showcases one of the earliest archaeological examples we have of the mutually beneficial relationships between humans and cats. Even though how
So that's a really interesting study for like 3 reasons. One, it shows you the difficulty of distinguishing between domestic cats and wild cats. In this case, they were able to do it because it was not a European or Near Eastern wild cat. It was a specific leopard cat native to the region, and they had to do more advanced kind of spatial studies called morphometrics, geometric morphometrics, which is, it's very specialized. You can't do it with your eye. You need special equipment and computer software to actually deal with that. The second thing that it looked at was the isotopic signature. So this is something I do. I do a lot of isotopes in my lab here at Cardiff. And this is actually one of the key points that some of these scholars argued made those Central European cats I mentioned that they thought came in the Neolithic. They argued that, in a sense, the isotopic evidence of what the cats were consuming showed that they were synanthropic. Synanthropic is a fancy word that basically means living with humans. They have a diet that comes from humans. Thank you, Elliot. I appreciate it. Bastet has your offering, and we'll drink a beer with it. The golden god speaks. So, in a sense, the isotopes show that these cats were among humans, and they were acting to, controlling pests and whatnot, and scavenging food from the humans and stuff like that. But in both of these cases, the one in China and in the one in Central Europe, genetic and morphometric studies now seem to show that these cats that were living among humans were actually wild. They were not tame per se. They were not they might have been acting sort of tame, but they were not what we think of as the domesticated cat. They were not related to your cat or my cat. And so in this sense, isotopes and context can confuse us, right? Because we might have isotopes that show these cats are living near humans, but they're not domesticated. And so that's a tough thing to parse out. And that then brings us back to the very first domesticated cat. One second, I put down my PowerPoint. So we talked about this burial on Cyprus from about 9,500 years ago. This is now something that scholars are disputing more and more. Cats might not have been domesticated this early. There's a huge gap, and I mean huge. We're talking like a 5,000, 6,000 year gap between these examples on Cyprus and between when we see cat bones showing up regularly in the archaeological record later on in Egypt. So that gap is really tough to explain. We have reasonable coverage of, Egypt, Cyprus, the Near East, etc. Where are these cats? So another explanation is that this cat is much like the cats we saw in China that Smithy introduced us to, or those wild cats from Central Europe, from Poland that I just talked about. That this is actually a wild variation that was to some degree living alongside humans, and in this case also buried with a human. Because humans brought these wild cats to Cyprus, but there really does not seem to be any strong evidence that this is what we would call a domesticated cat. And so I have always been skeptical of this because of the big gap. But now that we have more and more evidence showing how we're being fooled by mitochondrial DNA, by osteological determinations, so the morphology of the bones, and by isotope analysis of synanthropic diets, what that tells me is that I'm quite skeptical of this. And I have a feeling that the consensus on this is shifting. And I can see that even from the article. If we go back to the article, it mentions this cat in a sort of skeptical way. Wrong one. This is the new article. The burial of a cat with complete skeleton of a human led to the hypothesis that cats have been domesticated, where they may have acted as pest controllers in early farming communities. And a more traditional view built upon iconographic and funerary evidence could suggest 2200 BC in Egypt, yet attempts to tame cats may have started earlier. And so I am more in this latter half category. It's still an ongoing scholarly debate. I think more evidence and more studies can answer it. But I think that what we're going to see is that, sorry, stuff does not just keep getting older. Stuff often keeps getting younger. And cats are a perfect example. We are now sure about the introduction of cats to Europe and Anatolia and whatnot occurring much later. And just like with chickens and just like with rabbits, we are now sure of this. We have plentiful evidence. And I have a feeling that the evidence for domestication of cats that you see online and stuff like that, this Cyprus example always gets brought up. Again, I've pushed back on it on social media. I think it's a really exceptional example upon which to build a timeline of domestication. And so I'll be intrigued. I'll be watching the space to see how it changes over time, because I definitely think there's room for major shifts to happen. So yeah, so that's my story. That's the new archaeological science of cats. It's really cool to see the vibrant study of this topic, and the kind of big data, ancient DNA approaches that are really starting to show what's going on here with the picture of this. You know, archaeologists, we used to sort of work from single finds. These days, we're trying to assemble large data sets. This is how we put together patterns in the past. One monument doesn't say anything, and anybody who thinks that one find overturns history or something like that, they are essentially maybe not grifting you, but they're being disingenuous, or they're not informed well enough, because instead it's large data sets like this that are overturning the past. You know, this is what we work with in modern 21st century archaeology. We don't work with one-off finds. We work with large data sets and apply new scientific, robust methods to test our hypotheses, just like this team out of Rome did in a really admirable way. So I imagine news articles on this will start coming out soon. There already are a few. But you heard it here first, didn't you? The golden goddess speaks. So I'll take questions for about 10 minutes or so. If people have some questions, I'm happy to answer. I wasn't paying too much attention to the chat, but answer, did the cats build the Great Pyramids of Giza? The answer is yes, of course, the cats built the Great Pyramids of Giza, because as we know from so many YouTubers, humans could not cut granite. But cat claws? Oh, yeah. They'll slice through granite like it's butter. You know, and at the same time, humans, primitive Bronze Age humans, they could never have moved stones weighing a couple tons. It's just not possible. But cats, on the other hand, have you seen how persistent cats are? They are persistent. They are, you know, absolutely persistent. They will go and do things. If they want to build a pyramid, they will build that motherfucking pyramid. Okay, I don't know what to say. Shout out for dogs. Yeah, I love dogs too. I actually used to be a dog person, but living where I am now, the cats fits better, and my wife is a cat person. So I always claim that my cat is a dog-like cat, because I've trained him to come when we call him and to do little fetch games, and he acts a little bit like a dog sometimes. So yeah. So do chickens have large talons? No, they do not have large talons. What they do have, which is kind of cool, let me see if I have a photo of it. Where did you go? Oof, it's not on there. Let me see if I can find it. Metatarsus. No, I'll have to Google it. 1 second. Chickens have a spur on them. The male chickens have a spur on it. Metatarsus. Which is how you can identify a male rooster from a female chicken. So, come on. Let me pull up this. Do you see this kind of spike? I just made it disappear, of course. Do you see this hook right here, this large spike? This is what roosters have, and this is how we tell the difference between male and female chickens archaeologically. And these also show up on Greek vase paintings for cockfights, for example, because the roosters will, kick each other with their spurs, which I've never actually seen live cockfighting. I don't plan on seeing live cockfighting, but at the same time, these sort of spurs on the tarso-metatarsus, so the lower leg, is something that we can distinguish. So hey, Duke of Shaska, come on, don't give away my grift. The dog lobby has been funding this channel secretly for many years. They want me to spread bad news about cats. So okay, let's see what questions we have coming in here. Do I prefer the sun god or the golden god? Look, to me, it's the same thing, man. Long live the golden sun god, if that's what I'm talking about, right? Let's see. Chickens are very intelligent. I completely agree. I've not seen the research that you're talking about here, but I would not be surprised that it's true. And yeah, they're definitely intelligent. Yes, the pyramids are the world's largest enclosed litter boxes. This is a good point brought up by Woolwariness. 7,500-year-old cat might be a special case. Still, there are some individual examples of wild animals bonding with humans like birds. Yeah, that's actually probably what I'd imagine sort of is happening here, is that these are examples of humans engaging with wild animals. And we have plentiful evidence. In fact, in this case on Cyprus, they're buried. And in the case in China and Central Europe, the isotopes show that they're the diets of these cats, they're getting food from the humans, either scavenging it or being fed. That's less clear which one it is. But I certainly think these are examples of wild animals engaging with humans, which we have plentiful examples of in ancient texts and archaeology. I'm just trying to make the point that these are not domesticated cats, like the variety that we think of as a domesticated cat. That's all. I certainly think that these are examples of wild animals that are living among humans to some degree, at least within proximity of them. Lion mummies. I can't think of any lion mummies, though I could be wrong. Lion bones, I know of examples of from Greece, but I've not researched lions in Egypt, so I don't know. It's not my thing. Did that video mention lion mummy? It might have. I think it did, or it mentioned a lion burial. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer. I'd have to look it up. Let's see. Is there any evidence of the domestication of cats in the New World? No, I don't think so. No, not that I've ever heard of. So no, that's one of the big differences between the Americas and Eurasia and Africa, is that there aren't very many domesticated animals in the Americas. There's llamas and guanacos and turkeys, but there aren't many. So it's very different from and of course dogs arrived with people. So it's very different from Eurasia and Africa, where we have a large diversity of domesticated animals. Let's see. So what if more than one lineage of cats sort of domesticated themselves, but later the ones that are now domesticated cats replace them? Also, morphology and DNA wouldn't change right away. So yes, this is a good question. I actually have a colleague of mine that's working on failed domestication events of horses. So there's now growing evidence that there's some examples of horses being domesticated. Then those lineages die out, and then they're domesticated again into the variety that we think of as domesticated horses. I would not put that beyond it, but how are you going to distinguish between a domestication event? Like I said, you need some sort of change in the morphology of their bones, and you probably want some quantity of numbers. And we don't really, as far as I know, see that with these wild cats. I'd say tame might be a better term than domesticated, because domesticated should involve a major change in their reproductive lifestyle, and it should involve a big change, is usually what we see, that we can see in quantity. Like I said, big data. So it's possible It's possible, but in which case, where do you draw the line between domesticated and tame? Which I'm not gonna disagree. It's a blurry line, but at the same time, we try to define these things in ways that can be replicated and applied in different contexts. And without morphological changes, without increases in huge numbers of domesticated animals, I think we lack the evidence. And I'd say maybe tame is a better word than domesticated, if that makes sense. That's just my hunch, though. Maybe there's so few examples of these synanthropic cats that are living in proximity of humans, and even fewer examples of those that have been buried. Notice they're spread from Poland to Cyprus to China. So maybe with more evidence, we'll have a better sense of things. But we have lots of sites from these places at this time. So I'm skeptical that there's a ton more evidence that will show up, but it's worth entertaining the hypothesis. I'm not going to deny that. And that team from Poland, they have been entertaining that hypothesis for the last decade. So that is their working hypothesis, perhaps. Oh, no, they didn't have it as a different lineage. Maybe they'll shift it into a different lineage, though. That's possible. Let's see. Why do Panathenaic vases have roosters on the columns on the side where they show the goddess Athena? Yeah, it is really common. Why? I think it's martial iconography is the explanation that I've seen published, because Athena is the goddess of war, and cockfighting is, warlike, let's say. So it sort of has this connotation in ancient Greece of virility and combativeness. And so you see a lot of cockfighting scenes on ancient Greek vases. But I need to read up more on specifically the Panathenaic ones. I feel like I learned this at some point, and I'm not remembering it. I feel like my PhD advisor taught this to me 20 years ago, and I'm not remembering it. Let's see. I don't think Julia would have a buffalo wings recipe. Unfortunately, she's very British. She's not American like me. So I can ask her. But I'm guessing that she won't have a buffalo wings recipe. I've been meaning to have her on the channel. We finally have leveled up this Black Friday, and we have now the facilities to do in-person interviews. And we should release one on Robin Hood, the archaeology of Robin Hood, later this month. But she's on my short list of people here in Cardiff to interview. So I expect to see more on chickens, in the next year, without a doubt. So apparently there are some female chickens with spurs on one leg, so it's not a cut and dried distinguishing thing. Let's see. Scrolling through a bunch of comments. Thank you so much, Deviant Outcast. I really appreciate it. And yes, I will keep pushing back against pseudo-archaeology without a doubt. I'm going to throw out a few more straight-up archaeology stuff and some pseudo-science in general things. But don't worry, I have some return stuff. At the end of this, I'll explain my plan for the month, because we have a lot of fun things in the works. What's my favorite bone that I've ever studied? I'm sure I've answered this before. I mean, that penis bone that I described in my penis bone video from Knossos was my first favorite one, because that was pretty hilarious when I first discovered what a penis bone was. Certain carnivores have penis bones, dogs included. Primates used to have them. I have a whole video on penis bones, actually, because it's a fun topic. So that was certainly up there. Those chicken bones that I showed earlier are up there, because they're the ones that I found from Athens. I think they're the earliest chicken bones in the Greek world. They date to precisely 480 BC. And I think they are the earliest chicken bones, the clearest evidence for the introduction of chickens to the Greek world. So they are up there. I've also found the talon of a golden eagle, which would have been probably, we think, an amulet, because it was the whole talon at a site on Crete, Azoria. That's up there. So there you go. You have 3 good answers for the price of 1. Thank you so much, Thin Layer of Dust. But yeah, so those are some of my favorite bones. This is a good question. So in the Roman world, snakes are depicted, especially in the Republican and early imperial period, as kind of the guardians of the household. So if you look at sort of Larares, I can get rid of this, can't I? If you look at Larares, these house shrines, that exist in Pompeii and Rome and other Roman houses and elsewhere. It's where they have their own household deities. Snakes are frequently depicted as the kind of guardian of the household, as part of these lares, the house genius and stuff like that. And it is interesting now that we have these new dates for cats. I wonder if that might relate. I know who to ask. Amanda Pavlik. She was a PhD student with me in Cincinnati. She's done a bunch of research on these snakes and larares. So I could try to ask her if I remember. Haven't talked with her in a while actually. Good person. She's on Blue Sky, I think. So it's a good question, and actually, it would not surprise me. Snakes are great for pest control. If snakes kill rodents, well, so do cats. So, it's certainly a decent replacement. And cats are fuzzy and furry and cuter. So you could see maybe why. My brother used to have a pet snake. So, I've had pet snakes, pet cats, pet dogs. Yeah, so domestic cats are subspecies of African wildcat. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree with you, Glenn, completely. And I think that Tutmosis' sarcophagus is a good clue that they're domesticated by Dynasty 18. And I don't think that's in doubt. I think we actually think they're domesticated even earlier. There's plentiful evidence from burials and stuff like that. I think 2200 BC, I think, is when we have fairly confirmed evidence of domestication of the cat in Egypt. So that would be the very latest date that anybody would give. And that should be before Dynasty 18. So yeah. Yes, I agree. I have absolute pseudoscientists, and actually, I agree with this. I think that the more we research the domestication of plants and animals, we are seeing this as a back and forth. So this is a great point, Ninjestra, and thank you so much for the super chat. What we're seeing is that cats domesticate humans, humans domesticate cats. It's part of one phenomenon. It's the same thing as plants. I need to work up my presentation on the domestication of plants that I gave on Joe Rogan into a video. That's on the list for this next year. So you'll see more on domestication here, and plants, and how grains, in a sense, domesticated us to a certain degree. There's this kind of symbiosis of coexistence that I think we're now only starting to come to grips with in, say, the last 10 to 20 years. Scholars have been delving into that, and it leads into some really amazing insights into the process of domestication, which I think is really interesting. To be honest, there's not a whole lot. That's why it's so tough. So what are the physical changes that happen to domesticated cats? There's not a whole lot. That's one of the, especially osteologically, their snouts get shortened. So when you have complete skulls, you can tell a little differently. Like most animals, the snouts get shortened. But most of the changes are to their fur and the proliferation of different kinds of fur. And so we don't really see it. So what we're looking for these days is really this kind of genetic studies. We're really limited when we look at cats, because there are not many great osteological clues. Let's see. What's my opinion on popular archaeology shows like Time Team? I think Time Team is awesome. Though I did just hear about how they misrepresented one of my colleagues here at Cardiff once at the pub. He was telling me about it last week. And so it wasn't anything major that anybody would care for. It's not pseudoscience or something like that. It was just he had prepped, because I gave a lecture here about a week and a half ago to my colleagues about how to engage with the media and pseudoscience and all this kind of stuff, and my own research into this kind of stuff, the kind of stuff I present on YouTube, but it presented for colleagues, right? And if you see my Archaeology Wars video, it sort of mimicked that a little bit. So I gave a lot of advice to my colleagues on how to engage with the media, and he gave me this story. It's Neil Sharples. He just retired. He gave me this story about how he was engaging with Time Team on these kind of barrows and these mounds and stuff like that. And he presented these arguments, and he made it really, really clear, and they loved it, and they featured him. And then they ended, though, with some other dude on the interview who totally contradicted everything he said. And so he's like, it just made no sense. Like, I was saying all this stuff, and then this other person just said something completely different that they ended with, and there was no effort to try to weave them together or to compare and contrast these points of views or anything. But no, Time Team does an excellent job at popularizing archaeology. I'm a huge fan of it. I'm a huge fan, really, of any efforts to try to popularize the field. I think that journalism and sometimes some YouTubers, even YouTubers that I like, don't always do the best job of presenting up to date archaeology. They kind of use outdated perspectives and clickbait type stuff. Archaeologists baffled, bullshit like that. But I still think that's better than the pseudoscience that's out there. So I am a fan of pretty much anything that's trying to represent what scholars do. And I think scholars should do a better job of taking control over how the media and social media sees them. Let's see. Storage. Always wonder where they store all the material that is collected during excavations. I suspect big portions of the finds are not in exhibits or museums. Is there a method to conserve them? So yes, most of what you see in museums, the storerooms of every single museum versus what's on display. What's on display represents like 1 to 5% of what's in a storeroom, and that's even in like a major collection museum like the British Museum or the Penn Museum, or I don't know, the Getty or the Met, whatever, Louvre. A tiny percentage of their stuff is on display, and that's even them purchasing stuff for display because they just have too much stuff, which is why some of it should go back to their host countries. But even more material is stored in storerooms that are not connected to museums. That's where the vast majority of archaeological material is. And yes, there are efforts to conserve it, though, of course, material that was excavated, say, 100 years ago that's in a storeroom ain't being conserved too much. In many ways, the archaeology of the future is the archaeology of storerooms, because we need to go through so much stuff and apply new methods to it and restudy it with new questions. So, yeah. Thank you so much for becoming a member. I appreciate it, Julie Billy. In terms of support, I genuinely prefer Patreon to YouTube membership, but I'll take support of any kind to help keep this channel going. Does the acceptance of snakes in the household depend on how common venomous snakes are in the region? Like the Torah seems to accept fear of snakes as part of human nature. I have no idea. I've not really studied snakes. I've only ever found one snake in the osteological collection of an assemblage that I've studied on Crete, and we think that was a modern snake that had burrowed in. So I've never found any archaeological snake bones that I can think of. I'm not as if I would have given them to a reptile specialist anyway. So I'm not sure. Everybody's been asking me this question since my pyramids video about the History for Granite YouTube channel. To be blunt, I think he does a reasonable job with evidence, and he presents a reasonable picture of the archaeology of Egypt. That said, he's very aggressive towards scholars, and he calls us arrogant gatekeepers, and for that, I will never recommend his channel. Second of all, or third of all, he sometimes speculates in weird ways, like very weird ways. I was watching some of his videos not that long ago, actually, and like, when he was talking about the looting, I'm doing a video on the looting of the Great Pyramid, and he just sort of randomly went off the deep end with no evidence whatsoever. And so I would not trust everything he says, and his dislike towards arrogant scholars is very problematic and poisons the well against us. That said, he does mostly present factual information that is mostly correct. So in that sense, he gets kudos. He is not the same as a pseudoscientist per se. He is someone who I call an amateur, which is fine. I love amateurs. I want to be clear on that. I'd say pretty much most YouTubers are amateurs. Stefan Milo, Milo Rossi, all the good YouTubers out there are amateurs, and they're fantastic. And so in this sense, he is a very good, keen amateur who mostly sticks to the facts, who does sometimes go off on the deep end of speculation without any evidence, and can be very aggressive towards scholars of calling them arrogant gatekeepers. And for that, I can't forgive him. Like you're trying to paint us all with a big brush because, I don't know, you don't like Zahi Hawass? Like, fuck off, dude. Like, archaeologists and Egyptologists are mostly out there just trying to share what we got, man. So if you're going to critique us, well, then I'll be honest about and blunt about my thoughts on you. So I'm going to get through some of these because I need to go. Were our feline friends recognized as control against rats and other pests for helping with sanitation in classical times? Certainly not in the Greek periods, because the cats weren't there. In the Roman period, I don't know. I'd have to look it up. I'm sorry I don't have an answer for you, Robert. But I'd just be Googling, which you can do, and I'd have to look it up in scholarship from textual passages about cats. I don't focus enough on the imperial Roman world to have a good sense of it. So I'm sorry. I feel like I should know this, but I don't have an answer. Sorry about that. But thank you for the super chat. I do appreciate it. Let's scroll down. There we go. I got to the end of them. Oh, no, I have one more. Are cat bones found in ancient trash heaps, perhaps dying while scavenging, or bones discarded after being eaten? I think, like dogs, most of our cats come from burials. But we do, of course, get scattered cat remains in trash deposits, let's say. So yes, they are. But with these kind of pets, dogs, cats, horses, most of what we get is from burials, and that's partly just, if you think about it, in a trash heap, they don't usually die. They probably would have been thrown out there, right? You know, it would have been a carcass that would have been jumbled up. They could have even been consumed. We have evidence of dog butchery and consumption, and cat butchery and consumption at times. And so, trash heaps are all jumbled up, while a buried individual is usually reasonably complete. So just by pure numbers, numerically, quantitatively, most of our evidence for pets comes from burials, while most of our evidence for the animals that we eat comes from trash heaps. And so it's just sort of the nature of them. But yes, there are cats that show up in middens and sort of deposits randomly scattered around, without a doubt. I found some in later periods. So cool. I want to say thank you to everybody for showing up. This was great. Thank you for that super chat, Kelson Loads. I really appreciate it. You guys all rock. I hope you learned something interesting and fun about cats and about archaeology itself, and how we're constantly updating our picture of the past with big data sets and new methods. And it's really exciting. This is why I really hate that YouTube pushes my pseudoscience debunks more than me sharing real archaeology. Because I actually think that the real stuff that's going on is really exciting. So it's just doubled my commitment, though, to grow this channel, to try to get more of a fan base so that I can share more real archaeology as well as debunks. So what's coming up? In a few days, I think I have an interview with Professor Dave Explains, where we go into methods and approaches on debunking pseudoscience. And so that should be out soon. And then I'll have a video out on Neanderthal Neanderthal cannibalism. There's some new studies of Neanderthal cannibalism, which have just come out. And I had the pleasure of speaking to my colleagues and recording some interviews. And I'm working on putting it together into a presentation for you all on Neanderthal cannibalism. And then the next big thing is I have an interview with Dr. Lee Clare about Göbekli Tepe, and that's going to be in about 2 weeks, I imagine. That's a big one. So stay tuned. It's going to be called The New Story of Göbekli Tepe, because their new results are mind-blowing. Just absolutely mind-blowing. The new picture they have of Göbekli Tepe, and I'm going to be the first to present it publicly with him in the interview that I did with him, and I'm super excited because it's gonna rock everything. So that's what we have coming up over the next few weeks. I'll probably do some year-end stuff once I'm done teaching on kind of the best archaeology of 2025 and the stupid awards for the stupidest archaeology of 2025. So that should round out the month, and maybe even over the next 5-6 weeks of YouTubing. I might go live here or there. I haven't gone live as much because the side effects from my cancer treatment have been kind of dogging me, and I can't always predict when I'm healthy enough to want to speak late at night to a crowd. But I'm currently on steroids right now to mitigate the side effects, which is why you've seen me be so productive on YouTube, because I have energy from steroids. Prednisone, Hulk, mad. The Golden God is mad. But what that's led to is a lot of productivity in terms of my research, in terms of my teaching, and in terms of my YouTubing. And I'm hopeful that I'll be off the steroids next week, and I'm hopeful that I'll kick aside some of the side effects from my cancer treatment. The cancer treatment's going well. The cancer has reduced significantly. It is still there, unfortunately, but it is mostly gone, and it is gone from, I believe, the really dangerous spots that it was in. So, yeah, I have some time left to live at a minimum, and maybe this will cure me. It's certainly on the way, so fingers crossed it will cure me. And cool. I'll see you all later. Love and archaeology to y'all.
Rhymes and riddles, tickle, tickle, giggles, squiggle, jiggle, fiddle, flint, undibble. Rhymes and riddles, tickle, tickle, giggles, squiggle, jiggle, fiddle, dibble, 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 dibble. Flint, undibble, flint, undibble, flint.